She was fired in front of 40 people. No warning. No thank you. Just a badge taken off her chest like she was nothing. 12 hours later, she stood in a stadium of 60,000 strangers, wearing the same scrubs they told her to throw away. Nobody there knew what she used to be. Nobody knew the calm in her eyes had a name. When the stands gave way and the screaming started, the people who fired her would need her more than they ever had, and she would save 57 lives before anyone even learned her name. Welcome back to Secrets of Silent Badges. Before we start, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because these stories only get heavier from here. Now let's begin. Dana Whitfield folded her scrubs into a plastic grocery bag, bright cobalt blue, still warm from the dryer that morning. She hadn't planned on needing them again so soon. "You can leave the badge on the desk," said the woman from HR. She didn't look up from her paperwork. Dana set it down without a word. 6 years at Riverside Municipal, gone in 4 minutes. Instability concerns, they called it. A patient's family had complained, said Dana seemed distant, said she stared at the ceiling during a code instead of the monitor. They didn't know she'd been counting exits. Old habit. Hard one to break. The HR woman slid a folder across the desk. Severance terms, a line for her signature. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" the woman asked, almost as an afterthought. "No," Dana said. "There isn't." She signed the line. Her hand didn't shake. It never did. Not on paper, not in front of people who didn't matter. She walked out through the ambulance bay, past techs who wouldn't meet her eyes, and got into her car still wearing the scrubs nobody let her keep. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time before starting the engine. Not crying. Just still. The way she got when something needed to be filed away instead of felt. A skill she'd learned somewhere colder than this parking lot, somewhere with sand instead of asphalt. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from her sister. "How'd the shift go?" Dana looked at it, then set the phone face down without answering. Some things were easier to carry alone. Riverside was hosting a charity game that night. Bulldogs versus Firehawks, 50,000 seats, sold out for cancer research. Dana had signed up to volunteer months ago, back when she still had a badge. She almost didn't go. She sat in the stadium parking lot for 11 minutes, keys in her hand, engine off, watching families stream past her car toward the gates with foam fingers and team jerseys. Then she went anyway. Habits didn't care about paperwork. And somewhere underneath the numbness, a small, stubborn part of her refused to let one bad afternoon take away one more thing she'd chosen for herself. The stadium med tent sat under the north stands, a folding table and 2 coolers of saline. A volunteer coordinator named Priya handed her a clipboard. "You're still on the list. Nobody told me otherwise." "They will," Dana said. "Rough day?" "You could say that." Priya studied her for a second, then decided not to push. "Well, whatever happened, we're glad you're here. We're short 2 nurses tonight already. One called in sick, the other stuck in traffic on 95. How many volunteers total? 4, counting you, plus the paramedic crew contracted through the county, but they're mostly staged outside for anything serious. We handle blisters, dehydration, the occasional drunk fan who fell down some stairs." Dana nodded, scanning the tent's supply shelves out of habit. Saline, gauze, a single defibrillator. Not enough for anything worse than what Priya had described. And Dana filed that thought away too, the way she filed everything that might matter later. A stadium security guard named Frank stuck his head into the tent, radio crackling on his hip. "You the new nurse?" "Volunteer," Dana said. "Not new, just available." "Whatever you are, glad to have you. Last home game we had a guy go into anaphylaxis over a peanut mix-up and the closest medic was 4 sections away. Took 11 minutes to reach him." "He make it?" "Yeah, barely." Frank shook his head. "Building's got 60,000 people in it, and about 6 people who know what to do if something actually goes wrong." Dana didn't answer that, but she noted it anyway. 60,000 people. 6 who knew what to do. She'd operated with worse odds. Marcus Doyle ran stadium operations. 51, silver hair, a headset permanently clipped to his ear like a second skull. He found Dana refilling a first aid kit an hour before kickoff. "Whitfield, I got a call from Riverside HR. "I'm not surprised. They said you're not stable enough to be trusted around patients." I'm not treating patients tonight. I'm handing out ice packs. Doyle's jaw worked. Fine. Stay in the tent. Don't wander the concourse. Don't touch anything you're not asked to touch. Understood. I mean it. This is a big night for this stadium. National broadcast. Sponsors watching. I don't need a liability wandering my building. I heard you the first time, Marcus. It's Mr. Doyle, if we're being formal about it. You brought up my personnel file. I figured we already were. He stared at her a beat too long, like he couldn't decide whether that was insubordination or just honesty. Then he walked off before deciding, already barking something into his headset about parking overflow. Dana didn't hate him. She'd met 100 versions of Marcus Doyle. Men who ran things and needed everyone beneath them to know it. She'd learned a long time ago that arguing with them wasted breath she might need later. Better to save it. Better to watch instead. She counted exits instead. 14 on the lower bowl. 6 more on the upper deck. She noted where the ushers stood, where the wheelchair sections were, where the concrete pillars under Section 214 looked older than the rest, patched with a different shade of gray, like a scar that never quite matched the skin around it. She noticed things. She always had. 6 years of nursing hadn't erased 6 years before that. Some habits weren't habits at all. They were wiring, laid down somewhere training couldn't reach, the same wiring that made her check ceiling tiles during a code blue instead of a heart monitor. Because once, a ceiling had come down on people she loved, and she'd sworn she'd never miss the warning signs again. The stands filled fast. Vendors shouted over each other, hawking foam fingers and overpriced beer. A marching band ran through a warm-up in the tunnel below the tent, brass notes bouncing off concrete. And somewhere above her, a stadium engineer walked the upper concourse with a clipboard, checking boxes he'd probably checked 100 times before without incident. Priya leaned toward her over the folding table. You always this quiet before a shift? Just tired. You don't look tired. You look like you're waiting for something. Dana almost smiled. Bad habit. You worked trauma before Riverside? Something like that. Priya waited for more. Dana didn't give her any. After a moment, Priya shrugged and went back to organizing gauze pads, the way people do when they sense a door closing and decide not to knock again. A young man in an usher's vest jogged past the tent, clipboard under his arm, calling up to someone on the walkway above. Section 214's over the count again. I've got standing room tickets stacking up and no more room to put them. Just let them in, someone called back from higher up. Doyle wants full sellout optics for the broadcast. Corporate's watching the numbers tonight. That section's already packed. Let them in. Dana looked up at the exchange without turning her head fully, the way she'd learned to watch a room without seeming to watch it at all. She filed that away too. 60,000 people. 6 who knew what to do. And now, apparently, a section already over capacity being pushed further past its limit for a camera angle. At 7:42 during the second quarter, Dana heard it. A low groan. Metal flexing under weight it wasn't built for. Most people wouldn't have noticed it under 60,000 voices roaring at a touchdown. Dana went still. She'd heard that sound before. Not in a stadium. In a hangar half a world away, right before a roof came down on 6 men she couldn't save fast enough. She still heard that collapse some nights, right before she woke up gasping, reaching for a radio that wasn't there, her hand closing on nothing but a bedsheet and darkness. She looked up at Section 214, the patched concrete. The overloaded upper riser packed 3, maybe 4 rows past its rating because ushers had let standing room fans squeeze onto the bleachers for a better view of the game, exactly as she'd just watched happen. Priya, she said quietly, get Doyle, now. What's wrong? Just get him. Doyle arrived irritated, headset crackling with stadium chatter. What? Section 214. That structure's under stress. I need it cleared. Based on what? A feeling? Based on the sound it just made. Twice. And based on the fact that I watched your staff wave more people onto it 10 minutes ago after being told it was already over capacity. Doyle looked up at the packed section, thousands of fans on their feet, and shook his head. We are not clearing a section during a nationally broadcast charity game because a fired nurse heard a noise. Marcus, I'm asking you to check with your structural engineer. That's all. 5 minutes. Just walk up there and look at the patch job on those support columns. You don't work here anymore, Whitfield. You volunteer here. There's a difference, and tonight you're going to remember it. He turned to walk away, then added over his shoulder, "Stay in the tent." Frank, the security guard, lingered near the tent flap after Doyle left, radio still crackling low on his hip. "You really hear something up there?" "Twice," Dana said. "You didn't?" 60,000 people screaming at a touchdown. Hard to hear anything else. He hesitated. "You want me to walk up and take a look anyway? Off the record? Would Doyle fire you for it?" "Probably." "Then don't," Dana said. "Not yet. But stay close to a radio." Frank nodded slowly, something uneasy settling behind his eyes, and drifted back toward his post instead of arguing further. Dana looked up one more time. The patched gray concrete, the extra rows of fans crammed onto risers built for fewer bodies. The low groan she felt more than heard now, traveling up through the floor beneath her boots like something waking up after a long sleep. She reached under the folding table and quietly began checking the trauma kit. Tourniquets, chest seals, gauze. A SAM splint rolled tight in its pouch. She counted supplies the way she used to count ammunition. Fast, silent, automatic. Just in case. The stadium roared again for a first down. Somewhere above her, metal groaned back. Quieter this time, almost patient, like it was only a matter of minutes now, and Dana Whitfield, fired nurse, former staff sergeant, sat with her hand resting on a trauma bag and waited for the sound she already knew was coming. The section gave way 11 minutes later. It didn't collapse all at once. It buckled, one riser folding into the next like a card table under too much weight. And the sound that followed wasn't a crash so much as an avalanche. Concrete and steel and human bodies falling together in a noise that silenced 60,000 people for one long, terrible second before the screaming started. Dana was already moving before the dust settled. She grabbed the trauma bag and ran toward the wreckage, while security guards stood frozen at the barricades, radios shrieking with contradictory orders. "Everybody back," one yelled. "Get EMS up here," yelled another, though nobody moved to actually do it. A woman in a Bulldogs jersey stumbled past Dana, blood streaming from a gash on her scalp, screaming a name over and over into the dust. Dana caught her by the shoulder for half a second, checked her pupils, decided walking wounded, and let her go, already moving toward the people who couldn't walk at all. Frank was there before the paramedics, radio abandoned somewhere in the chaos, hauling a slab of broken bleacher off a teenager's legs with his bare hands. He looked up and saw Dana coming and didn't ask any questions this time. "Tell me what to do," he said. "Stay with him. Don't let him move his neck." Dana knelt beside the teenager for 2 seconds, checked his pulse, his pupils, the angle of his leg, and moved on. Not critical. Not yet. The scene under Section 214 looked like something out of a war zone. Twisted metal railing, slabs of broken concrete stacked at angles that made no sense. Bodies pinned beneath debris, some conscious and screaming, some silent in a way that scared her more than the screaming did. Dana counted fast. Training she hadn't used in years came back like it had never left. Muscle memory older than her nursing license, older than the badge she'd left on a desk that afternoon. 57 visible casualties, maybe more underneath the collapsed section itself. Local paramedics arrived in 2s and 3s, overwhelmed, unsure where to even begin. One young EMT named Jake stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring, his hands shaking too hard to unzip his own bag. "Sir," Dana said, sliding to her knees beside a man pinned under a concrete slab, his leg crushed to the mid-thigh. "I need you here. Now." Jake blinked at her, pale. Who are you?" "Someone who can help. Hold this exactly like I show you." The man under the slab was gray, sweating, his pulse thready under Dana's fingers. Crush syndrome. She'd seen it before, in places that didn't have hospitals within 100 miles, in places where the only thing standing between a soldier and a heart attack was somebody who knew exactly what came next. "Don't lift that slab until I say," she told the 2 firefighters trying to pry it free. "You lift it now, the toxins built up in his leg hit his heart in 60 seconds, and he's dead before the ambulance gets here. We can't just leave him under there." "You're not leaving him. You're buying his heart time." Dana pulled a line from the trauma bag, found a vein in his arm on the first try, and pushed fluids fast. "Aggressive IV fluids first, wide open. Bicarb if we have it in that kit. Then we lift together, on my count. and I need a tourniquet ready the second that leg is free, high and tight." The firefighter stared at her like she'd spoken another language. Then he nodded and did exactly what she said, because in the middle of chaos, a voice that sounds certain is worth more than any title. "Name?" Dana asked the man, keeping him talking, keeping him with her. "Ray," he managed. "Ray Coelho. My daughter's up there somewhere. Section 210. She's 12. We'll find her, Ray. Right now I need you to breathe with me." Dana counted out loud. In for 4, out for 4, and watched his shoulders drop half an inch with each cycle, panic loosening its grip just enough for the fluids to start doing their work. Doyle arrived through the chaos, headset half fallen from one ear. Face pale as concrete dust settled on his shoulders. "Whitfield, what the hell are you doing? You're not cleared for this." "There is no cleared right now, Marcus. There's people bleeding and people who know what to do about it." She didn't look up from the patient. "Get me more hands, now." For once, he didn't argue. He turned and ran toward the tunnel, shouting for every off-duty officer and stadium medic he could find. She moved from body to body, triaging with a calm that unsettled everyone around her. Black tag, yellow tag, red tag, the old system falling out of her mouth before she remembered it existed anywhere outside a war zone briefing tent. A boy no older than 9, airway collapsing from a piece of debris across his chest, his mother screaming his name over and over. Dana cleared it with 2 fingers and a tilt of his jaw before the mother even finished the sentence, and the boy's first breath came back ragged but real. "He's breathing. Stay with him. Talk to him." "Don't stop talking to him," Dana told the mother, already moving to the next one. A woman with an open pelvic fracture, blood pooling fast beneath her on the concrete. Dana wrapped a bedsheet someone had brought from a concession stand around her hips like a sling, cinched it tight, and moved on before the woman even understood what had just saved her life. An elderly man in cardiac arrest, his wife kneeling over him uselessly, hands hovering without knowing what to do. Dana started compressions herself, counted aloud. 30 and 2, 30 and 2, sweat running into her eyes, and didn't stop until a defibrillator someone finally found gave her a shockable rhythm, and a weak, stubborn pulse answered back. Jake, the young EMT who'd frozen earlier, found his footing beside her, following her lead without question now, handing her supplies before she asked for them, learning faster under fire than most medics learned in a year of shifts. "How do you know all this?" he asked, voice shaking, hands steadier than they'd been 10 minutes ago. "Later," Dana said. "Hold pressure here. Don't let go until I tell you." "You're not really a hospital nurse, are you?" "Later," Dana said again, and meant it as kindly as the word could be meant in the middle of a disaster. Priya arrived with more supplies from the med tent, her arms full of gauze and saline bags, and stopped cold at the edge of the wreckage, staring at the scale of it. At bodies and blood and broken concrete stretching further than the tent's small stock of bandages could ever hope to cover. "Priya," Dana called without looking up. "I need every roll of gauze you're holding and someone to start a supply chain from the tent. Now, not in a minute." Priya blinked once, twice, then moved, because sometimes the only cure for shock is a job to do. A woman in a torn Firehawks jersey grabbed Dana's arm as she passed, pointing frantically toward a gap in the debris. "There's still people under there. I can hear them. Please, my husband." Dana followed her to a shifted slab of concrete, 3 feet thick, wedged at an angle over a hollow pocket of space beneath it. A man's hand protruded from the gap, fingers moving weakly. "Sir, can you hear me?" Dana called into the gap. A muffled voice answered, thin with pain. "I'm here. My chest. Something's on my chest. We're going to get you out. I need you to breathe as shallow as you can. Don't fight against whatever's pressing on you." She turned to the nearest firefighter. "I need a hydraulic spreader or a jack, whatever this crew has. That slab moves wrong. It crushes him instead of freeing him." "We've got 1 spreader. It's being used 2 sections over. Then get it here after that patient's clear. This one's stable for now." "Airways open. He's talking. Prioritize the ones who stop talking." The firefighter nodded and radioed the request, and Dana moved on, filing the trapped man's location in her memory, the way she filed everything, a map of the wreckage assembling itself in her head faster than anyone else could write it down. Frank had abandoned any pretense of security duty entirely, working now as Dana's extra set of hands, dragging debris, holding pressure, calling out numbers when she asked for them. At one point, he looked at her, blood on his forearms up to the elbow, and said, quiet enough that only she could hear it, "You've done this before, not in a hospital." Dana didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. And for Frank, that silence said enough. Somewhere behind her, a stadium employee in an orange vest ran past shouting that Section 216, next to the collapsed one, was showing cracks along its lower supports, the same patched gray concrete Dana had clocked an hour earlier from the med tent. "Get everyone off that section," Dana called to the nearest officer. "Now, before we have a second collapse on top of the first one." The officer hesitated, looking toward Doyle's retreating back for confirmation that never came, then made the call himself, waving frantically toward the crowd still packed into 216, herding them down the aisles as fast as fear and confusion allowed. It held. Barely. But it held. And nobody in that section ever knew how close they'd come to becoming 58 through 200. It was the sound of a nearby radio. A National Guard evacuation unit checking in over the chaos as helicopters began circling above the stadium lights that made her flinch, just for a second. Just long enough for someone nearby to notice, though in the noise and the blood, nobody had time yet to ask her why. Rotor wash flattened grass in the parking lot beyond the gates. Spotlights swept across broken concrete and scattered stretchers. Somewhere above the wreckage, a stadium announcer's voice, thin and useless now, asked everyone to please remain calm and await further instructions. A message nobody below Section 214 had the luxury of hearing. By the time the last of the immediate red tag patients had a line in and a set of hands assigned to them, Dana's own hands were finally starting to shake. The adrenaline that had carried her through the worst of it beginning, at last, to loosen its grip. She didn't stop moving. Not yet. There was still Ray Coelho's leg to free. Still a dozen more patients waiting on stretchers for a hospital bed that hadn't arrived. Still a man in the wreckage nearby who was about to say a word that would end the quiet life she'd spent 6 years building. Ray Coelho's leg finally came free 20 minutes after the collapse, freed on Dana's count. The tourniquet cinched tight the instant the slab lifted clear. He was pale, shaking, but conscious. And somewhere behind them, a firefighter's radio crackled with news that a 12-year-old girl matching his daughter's description had been found safe 2 sections over, walking wounded, minor cuts only. "Tell him," Dana said to the paramedic taking over Ray's stretcher. "Tell him before you load him, not after." The paramedic did, and for the first time since the collapse, Dana saw someone in that wreckage cry from something other than pain. She moved to the next patient, and the next, the wreckage narrowing now to smaller pockets of the badly hurt, as the walking wounded were funneled out through cleared exits, and the dead were, for the moment, left where they lay, because there was nothing left to do for them that couldn't wait. She moved to the next patient, and the next, the wreckage narrowing now to smaller pockets of the badly hurt, as the walking wounded were funneled out through cleared exits, and the dead were, for the moment, left where they lay, because there was nothing left to do for them that couldn't wait. A woman in her 60s, both legs pinned beneath a fallen railing, screamed each time anyone came near her. Dana knelt anyway, spoke low and steady, found the woman's hand instead of her leg first. "What's your name?" "Carol." "Carol, I'm Dana. I need you to look at me, not at your legs. Can you do that?" Carol's eyes, wide with panic, found Dana's and held there. "Good. Now I'm going to check what's under that railing, and it's going to hurt, but I need you to breathe through it with me. Can you do that too?" Carol nodded, jaw clenched, and Dana worked fast, hands steady, even as Carol's screams rose and fell around her, until the railing lifted and a second tourniquet went on, and Carol's screaming finally broke into something closer to sobbing relief. "You're going to keep both legs," Dana told her, checking capillary refill in her toes one more time before waving over a stretcher team. "It'll be a long recovery, but you're going to walk again." Carol grabbed Dana's hand as they lifted her. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Dana." "Thank you, Dana." Carol's grip tightened for one more second before the stretcher crew pulled her away toward the ambulance line, and Dana was already turning toward the next voice calling out from the wreckage. It was the sound of a nearby radio, a National Guard evacuation unit checking in over the chaos as helicopters began circling above the stadium lights, that made her flinch again. Just for a second. Just long enough for the man she was treating next to notice. He was older, maybe 50, a compound fracture in his forearm, blood soaking through a torn dress shirt, his face gray with shock. He looked at her hands as she splinted the break, fast, practiced, exact, wrapping and locking it in a pattern that had nothing to do with civilian first aid. "That's a combat splint," he said quietly, through gritted teeth. Dana kept working, jaw tight. "Just a splint." "No. I know a combat splint when I feel one. I had 6 of them done on me in Kandahar." He studied her face for the first time, really looked at her, past the blood and the cobalt scrubs, and the exhaustion in her eyes. His own eyes went wide, disbelief cracking through the pain. Ghost. Dana's hands stilled for half a second. Only half a second. "Ghost. It's me. Reyes. 1st Battalion. The extraction at..." He winced, gripping her wrist with his good hand. "You pulled me out of a burning Humvee. You called in the air support when nobody thought a combat controller could still be alive on that hill." "Sir, I need you to stay still," she said, voice even, though something in her chest had gone tight and hot. "You're supposed to be a staff sergeant. You're supposed to be..." He looked down at her scrubs, at the stadium volunteer badge clipped crook to her chest. "What are you doing in a hospital uniform?" A few feet away, Jake had stopped moving. So had 2 firefighters. So had Priya, who'd arrived with more supplies, and now stood frozen at the edge of the wreckage, clipboard forgotten in her hand. Nobody said anything for a moment. The only sound was distant sirens, rotor blades cutting through the night air, and 60,000 people somewhere beyond the barricades still not fully understanding what had just happened under Section 214. "Sir," Dana said again, quieter this time, "I need you to let go of my wrist so I can finish this splint." Reyes let go, but he didn't stop talking, the words tumbling out of him now like something that had waited 6 years to be said. "You disappeared. After the accident, after we lost Danny, you just disappeared. I looked for you. Wrote letters that came back unopened. I thought..." His voice broke. "I thought you might be dead. Command wouldn't tell us anything." "I'm not dead," Dana said. "I just stopped being who I was." "Why?" Dana didn't answer that. She tied off the splint instead, checked his pulse one more time, and finally allowed herself to look him fully in the face. 6 years of a stranger's life falling away in the space of a breath. "It's good to see you, Reyes. It's good to see you too, Ghost." He almost smiled, despite the pain, despite the wreckage around them. "Never thought it'd be like this." "Neither did I." Reyes wouldn't let it go, even as they lifted him onto a backboard. "Ghost, look at me. Why are you here, in scrubs, letting some rent-a-cop tell you where you can and can't stand?" "I'm not that person anymore, sir. You don't stop being that person. You just stop telling people." His voice cracked, half from pain, half from something older. "You saved 11 of us that night. You saved me. And I never even got your real name." "Dana," she said quietly. "Dana Whitfield. Dana." He said it like he was testing whether it fit her. It didn't. Not entirely. Not yet. More stretchers moved past. More faces she'd remember for years, filed away somewhere she couldn't reach in daylight, but that came roaring back the second someone needed her hands instead of her paperwork. An Army National Guard medevac unit set down in the parking lot beyond the stadium gates, rotor wash flattening the grass. Dana's whole body went rigid at the sound, a memory older than tonight rising up fast and unwelcome, a hangar roof falling in slow motion behind her eyes, even as her hands kept moving without her permission, steady, sure, unstoppable. She breathed through it. In for 4. Out for 4. A young National Guard corpsman jogged over from the landing zone, scanning the scene for the senior medical authority the way training taught him to. His eyes landed on Dana, on the confident, economical way she moved between patients, and something in his posture straightened without him seeming to decide it. "Ma'am, who's running triage here?" "I am for now," Dana said. "Until your CO wants to take it over." "You military?" "Was." He looked at her a beat longer than the question required, the way people sometimes did around others who carried themselves a certain way, and then simply nodded and asked what she needed from his unit instead of pressing further. Dana gave him a rundown in 6 clipped sentences, and he relayed it word for word into his radio. No questions, no hesitation. The way orders moved between people who recognized competence when they saw it. By the time the last critical patient was loaded and rolling toward the ambulance bay, Dana's hands were shaking for the first time all night, adrenaline finally letting go of its grip on her. She sat back on her heels in the dust and the broken concrete and let herself feel it, just for a second, before she had to stand back up and be useful again. Jake crouched beside her, offering a bottle of water he'd found somewhere in the chaos. "You saved that man's leg, and that little boy's airway, and I don't even know how many others." "You held pressure on 3 of them yourself," Dana said. "You did the work too." "Because you told me how." He hesitated. "That guy called you Ghost, called you Staff Sergeant. What was that?" "A different life," Dana said, and didn't elaborate, and Jake, to his credit, didn't push. "For what it's worth," he added, standing, brushing dust off his knees. "Whatever that life was, I hope you don't go back to hiding it. 60,000 people are alive tonight, partly because you didn't stay in that tent." "Ask me again in a week," Dana said. "I might have a different answer." Marcus Doyle found her there. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the wreckage, at the 57 people who were alive because a woman he'd told to stay in the tent hadn't listened, and at the veteran on the stretcher who kept calling her by a name that wasn't on any hospital badge. "Ghost," Doyle said finally, testing the word like it might explode. "Who exactly did I fire tonight, Whitfield?" "You didn't fire me tonight, Marcus. Riverside did that yesterday. Don't play games with me. That man back there said you called in air support, said you pulled him out of a burning vehicle. That's not something a nurse does." "No," Dana said. "It isn't." She stood, brushing concrete dust from her scrubs, and for the first time all night, she didn't look away from him. "You wanted to know what I was hiding," she said. "You're about to find out whether you like it or not." A cell phone camera, held by a shaking teenager near the barricade, had caught the whole exchange. By morning, it would already be everywhere. But right now, none of them knew that yet. Right now, there was only the wreckage, the sirens, and a name nobody in that stadium was supposed to know. Somewhere behind them, a local news van pulled up to the gates, red lights spinning. The teenager's video had already reached 4,000 views. By morning, it would reach 4 million. Somewhere in a federal office 3 states away, a search had already begun, tracing a whispered name back to a service record that had officially ceased to exist 6 years earlier. Dana didn't know that yet, but she knew enough to understand the quiet, anonymous life she'd built after the war was already over. By sunrise, the video had 11 million views. Dana sat in a plastic chair outside the stadium's administrative office, still in her blood-stained scrubs, a paper cup of cold coffee untouched in her hands. Reporters camped outside the gates, vans lining the access road 3 deep. Doyle's assistant had already fielded 40 interview requests before 9 a.m., and a local anchor was doing a live stand-up not 50 feet from the barricade, gesturing toward the wrecked section behind her like it was a movie set instead of the place 57 people had nearly died 12 hours earlier. Inside the office, voices were rising. "I don't care what she did last night," said a man in an expensive suit, pacing behind Doyle's desk. Warren Ellery, regional vice president for the company that owned the stadium. "I care that Section 214 was rated for 400 people, and we sold standing room for 600. I care that somebody signed off on that." "That was a scheduling error," Doyle said, sweating through his collar. "That was negligence, Marcus. And now it's on the news next to footage of some mystery nurse pulling bodies out of the wreckage. Do you understand what that does to us? It makes people ask questions. Questions about inspection reports. Questions about who signed what. I can handle the nurse. Handle her how? Discredit her. Media already knows she was fired from Riverside yesterday for instability. We lean into that. Confused woman, PTSD, maybe delusional about some military past. It muddies the story enough that nobody focuses on our maintenance logs." Ellery considered it, tapping a pen against the desk like a metronome counting down something. "Get me those inspection reports from the last 6 months, all of them, before anyone else asks for them. And if the Air Force asks first? Then we haven't found them yet." Dana heard every word through the thin office door. She didn't move, She'd heard men like Ellery before, in briefing rooms half a world away, men who could look at a body count and see only a budget line. Priya found her outside a few minutes later, eyes red from no sleep, still wearing yesterday's volunteer vest. "They're talking about you in there like you're the problem," Priya said. "I know. Are you going to let them?" Dana looked at her coffee, cold and untouched. "No." "What are you going to do?" "Whatever I'm good at," Dana said, which apparently is showing up where I'm not wanted and refusing to leave until the job's done. Priya almost laughed, despite everything. That tracks. Reyes found her next, wheeled out in a hospital gown, arm in a fresh cast, an Air Force escort standing stiffly behind him. "Staff Sergeant Whitfield," said the escort, a young captain with a folder under his arm. "I'm Captain Alvarez, Office of Special Investigations. We need to talk." Dana finally looked up. "About what?" "About the fact that your service record shows a general discharge 6 years ago, followed by a classified administrative flag that most people in this building don't have clearance to even see exists. And about the video of you performing a level 1 trauma triage that half my department is already calling the best they've seen from anyone, military or civilian, in a decade." "I'm not under investigation for anything, Captain." "No," Alvarez agreed. "But somebody just tried to erase inspection records tied to 57 casualties, and I'd rather you help me find them before that happens." "How do you even know about that already?" "Because the moment your call sign hit 11 million views, 3 separate federal agencies started pulling threads on this stadium. Yours isn't even the strangest one this morning." Alvarez pulled a folding chair over and sat across from her, lowering his voice. "Off the record, Sergeant. What happened to you 6 years ago? Your files got more redactions than words." Dana was quiet for a long moment. "We lost a man during a joint training exercise. Danny Ruiz. I was the combat controller on the ground calling the flight path. Command needed the incident closed fast, quietly, before it became a bigger story than it already was. My discharge paperwork happened 2 weeks later. You think it was punishment. I think it was convenient." Alvarez wrote nothing down, but something in his expression shifted, filing the answer away the same careful way Dana filed everything else. "I'll look into it. Right now I need your help with something more immediate." Doyle stepped out of his office in time to hear the last part. His face went the color of the concrete from the night before. "Whitfield, a word." "You can say it in front of the captain." Doyle hesitated, then straightened his tie like it might give him back some authority. "Corporate wants this handled quietly. That means you stop talking to press, you stop talking to federal agents, and you let us manage the narrative." "The narrative," Dana repeated. "Yes. Marcus, there's a spreadsheet in that building somewhere showing your stadium sold 200 more tickets to Section 214 than it was rated for. Ellery just asked you to bring it to him before anyone else sees it. I heard that through the door." Doyle's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You can manage a narrative," Dana said. "You can't uncollapse a bleacher." A stadium PR representative appeared in the hallway, clipboard in hand, looking between Doyle and Dana like she'd walked into the middle of something she wasn't briefed on. "Mr. Doyle, corporate wants a joint statement ready within the hour. Something about heroism, community, moving forward together." "Not now," Doyle snapped, and the PR rep retreated as fast as she'd arrived. "They want to put you in the statement," Doyle said to Dana, quieter now, almost bitter. "Local hero nurse. Good for the brand, apparently, once the lawyers signed off on it. Tell them no. You'd turn down good press?" "I'd turn down being used to bury a story about a corporate executive who overloaded a bleacher section for a camera angle," Dana said. "Pick whichever version you think sounds better in the statement." Doyle lingered a moment longer than he needed to, looking at the door Ellery was still pacing behind. "You know what's strange," he said. 11 years I've worked for this company, never once questioned a directive from corporate, just did what I was told and collected a paycheck. Last night you disobeyed a direct order from me and saved 57 lives doing it. Today Ellery's giving me directives that would bury the truth about why that section came down in the first place, and for the first time, I'm the one hesitating." "That's not strange," Dana said. "That's just the first time it mattered enough to notice." Doyle didn't have an answer for that. He walked back toward his office slower than he'd walked out of it, and something in his posture had changed, small but real, the way a man's posture changes right before he decides to stop following orders that don't sit right with him. Alvarez's radio crackled. He listened, jaw tightening. "Sergeant Whitfield, we have a problem. Someone in facilities just accessed the maintenance server and started deleting files. 20 minutes ago." "Ellery," Priya said quietly. "I need eyes on that server room," Alvarez said. "Now, before anything else disappears." Dana was already standing. "I know this building better than anyone in it. I spent last night memorizing every hallway looking for exits nobody else was watching." Alvarez looked at her for a long second, weighing something. "That's not standard practice for a stadium volunteer." "No," Dana said. "It isn't. Lead the way, Sergeant." They moved fast through service corridors still littered with yesterday's dust, past cleanup crews sweeping broken glass into neat piles, past a mural of past championship teams, with a long crack running straight through the center of it like a fault line. Reyes insisted on coming too, wheeling himself along one-handed despite Alvarez's objections, muttering something about not missing this for anything. "You don't have to prove anything to me anymore," Dana told him without looking back. "I'm not proving anything," Reyes said. "I'm just not letting Ghost walk into a room alone again. Did that once. Regretted it for 6 years." Dana didn't answer that. She didn't trust her voice to. Down a side stairwell, they passed a maintenance closet with its door ajar, and Dana's eyes caught something the others walked right past. A laminated capacity chart for Section 214, taped inside the door, the numbers on it crossed out in pen and rewritten higher, initialed with a signature she didn't recognize yet, but would soon enough. "Captain," she said, stopping. "Photograph that before we go any further." Alvarez did, and the small evidence already stacking up in his phone's camera roll grew by one more piece, quiet and damning, waiting for a courtroom that hadn't been scheduled yet. Priya caught up to them near the stairwell landing, slightly out of breath. "Doyle just got a call from corporate headquarters. I overheard part of it through his office door before he shut it. Someone above Ellery, telling him this needs to disappear by end of day or heads are going to roll all the way up the chain." "Whose heads?" Dana asked. Didn't catch that part. But Doyle looked sick after he hung up. Sicker than he already looked. Alvarez made a note on his phone. "That's useful. If Ellery's getting pressure from above, this goes higher than one regional VP falsifying one capacity chart. That's the kind of thing that turns a local negligence case into a federal fraud investigation." "Good," Dana said. "Then let's make sure that server room still has something worth investigating by the time we get there." The server room sat 2 floors below the concourse, behind a door that required a badge Dana no longer had. She didn't need one. "Emergency override," she said, pointing to a panel beside the frame. "Every stadium built after 2015 has one. Fire code." Alvarez pried the panel open. The door released with a hiss. Inside, a facilities technician sat hunched over a terminal, a USB drive half inserted, his hands shaking on the keyboard, sweat darkening the collar of his stadium polo. "Step away from that computer," Alvarez said, badge raised. The technician froze, eyes darting between the badge and the door, then bolted for a side exit instead of answering, shoving past a rack of servers hard enough to send cables crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. Dana moved before she'd decided to. 6 years of nursing hadn't erased 6 years of something else, and her body remembered exactly how to close distance on a moving target through a cluttered room. She cut him off at the door, put a hand flat against his chest, and pinned him against the frame with a calm that made him stop struggling almost instantly. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Not loud, just certain. "I just do what they tell me," the technician said, voice cracking. "Ellery's people said delete the audit logs or I'm out of a job." "Then you can tell that to the captain," Dana said, and stepped back to let Alvarez cuff him. "Sergeant, you want to explain how you just did that in bare hands with a busted rib you didn't tell anyone about?" Dana touched her side for the first time and realized he was right. She hadn't noticed it happen. She never did. Not until afterward, when the adrenaline finally let go and left the bill behind. Reyes wheeled himself further into the room, eyeing the technician, now sitting cuffed and pale against the server rack. "You know, back in the day, we'd have just called this a soft target and moved on. Guess civilian life's got its own version of a takedown." "Guess it does," Dana said, checking the terminal screen, where a deletion script had frozen mid-execution, roughly 40% of the audit files already gone. "Can you recover what he already wiped?" Alvarez asked. "Not me. But there's a backup array in most stadium server rooms this size, usually in a separate closet for redundancy. If they haven't found that one yet, we might still have everything." "How do you know that?" "Because I spent the drive over here reading building schematics on my phone instead of sleeping," Dana said. "Old habit. Never walk into a building you haven't mapped first." They found the backup closet 2 doors down, unmarked, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of place nobody thinks to look unless they already know what they're looking for. The drive inside held 6 months of inspection reports, untouched, uncorrupted, timestamps intact. Section 214 had failed a capacity audit twice. Both times, Ellery's signature approved an exception anyway, citing projected revenue from added seating, the language of the memo colder than anything Dana had read in a long time. Alvarez scrolled through the numbers, jaw tightening with every page. This isn't a scheduling error. This is a paper trail showing a corporate executive knowingly overloaded a structure that then collapsed on 60,000 people. "Now you have your investigation," Dana said. "Now I have 2, Alvarez said. "One into Ellery, and one into who exactly you are. Because Staff Sergeant Dana Whitfield of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron has been listed as separated from service for 6 years, and last night she ran a mass casualty response better than most active duty medics I've watched in the field." Reyes, still in his wheelchair by the door, laughed once, painfully, wincing as it pulled at his cast. "Told you. Ghost." "Stop calling me that," Dana said, but there wasn't much heat in it anymore. Detection came first, the way it always had in the field. Dana heard footsteps in the corridor outside, more than one set, moving fast, and put a hand up for quiet before Alvarez had even registered the sound. 2 people, she murmured. Coming from the east stairwell. Not stadium security, the gate's wrong, too rushed, too casual with the noise they're making. Alvarez drew his sidearm halfway from its holster, not fully, just ready. "Ellery's lawyers?" Maybe just employees. But get behind the rack, just in case." Dana positioned herself near the door, scanning the room for anything she could use if it came to that, an old habit that never fully switched off, weaponizing a space out of instinct long before her conscious mind caught up to the decision. It was Ellery's own security detail, 2 private contractors in stadium-branded polos that didn't quite disguise the tactical posture underneath, sent ahead of him to clear the room before he arrived. They stopped short in the doorway at the sight of Alvarez's badge and Dana standing calm and unbothered beside a cuffed technician. "This is a restricted area," one of them said. "So is federal evidence tampering," Alvarez said. "Which is what your employer's about to be charged with. You're welcome to wait for him outside." The 2 contractors exchanged a look, weighed their options, and chose retreat over escalation, backing out of the doorway with the particular caution of men who just realized they were outmatched and outranked in a room they thought they controlled. By the time Ellery himself arrived at the server room, flanked by 2 lawyers and the same security detail now considerably less confident than they'd been minutes earlier, the recovered drive was already sealed in Alvarez's evidence bag, and 2 more federal agents were waiting for him instead. "This is a misunderstanding," Ellery started, straightening his tie the way men like him always did when the ground shifted under them. "You can explain it to the Inspector General," Alvarez said. "Or to the families of 57 people who nearly died because you signed an exception you knew was a lie." Ellery's eyes cut to Dana. "You, the nurse, this is your fault. If you'd just stayed in your tent like Doyle told you." "If I'd stayed in my tent," Dana said quietly, "there'd be more than 57 names on that list. Some of them might have been yours." "You have no idea what you've just done," Ellery said, voice rising, control slipping for the first time. "Do you understand what this company is? What it does to people who threaten its bottom line?" "I've had guns pointed at me by people with more conviction than you," Dana said. "You don't scare me. You just disappoint me. There's a difference." Ellery's lawyers moved to intervene, but the moment for negotiation had already closed, sealed inside an evidence bag 2 feet away, and everyone in the room seemed to understand it at the same time, the way a courtroom understands a verdict before it's read aloud. Doyle stood off to the side through all of it, silent, watching the man he'd answered to for 11 years get walked out past the same wreckage crews still clearing concrete from the parking lot. He looked, for the first time since Dana had met him, like a man without a script to read from. "I told you to stay in the tent," he said finally, to no one in particular. "You did," Dana said. "I'm glad I didn't listen." Doyle nodded slowly, something settling in him that looked almost like relief. The particular relief of a man who'd just watched someone else make the hard call he'd been too afraid to make himself. "For what it's worth," he added, "I'm putting in a formal statement supporting the investigation. Everything I saw, everything I heard him say this morning." "That's worth something," Dana said. "More than you probably think." Outside, the press had already caught wind that something was happening beyond the usual hero-nurse narrative. Cameras swung toward the entrance as Ellery was walked out, flashbulbs catching the moment his lawyers tried and failed to shield him from the lenses. A reporter shouted a question about the falsified capacity reports, and for a split second, before his lawyer could stop him, Ellery's face confirmed everything the question implied. Dana watched it from a second-floor window, Priya beside her, both of them silent as the story that would run on every network by evening assembled itself in real time below. "You did that," Priya said quietly. "You know that, right? Not just last night. This too." "I just followed a paper trail," Dana said. "Alvarez did the rest." "You keep saying things like that, like your part in it doesn't count unless you're the one holding a scalpel." Dana didn't have an answer for that either, not one she trusted herself to say out loud yet. Alvarez found her afterward, in the quiet of an emptying hallway, the chaos of the morning finally starting to thin. "I've got enough here to build a solid federal case against Ellery. Fraud, falsification of safety records, obstruction. He's not walking away from this one." "Good. I also made a call while you were in there. To the personnel office handling your old file." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's more to your discharge than a training accident, Sergeant. I think you already suspect that. I'll have documentation by tomorrow, if you want to see it." Dana's jaw tightened. "I want to see it." "Then I'll bring it myself." Reyes caught her in the parking lot as she was leaving, wheelchair traded for crutches now, his cast bright white against the morning light. "You look like someone who just found out the ground under her feet isn't as solid as she thought." "Something like that." "Good," he said. "Solid ground gets boring." "You were never built for boring, Ghost." Dana almost smiled despite everything. Dana, he corrected himself, grinning. Still getting used to it. That night, alone in the small apartment she'd almost stopped paying rent on, Dana sat on the edge of her bed and finally let her hands shake the way they'd wanted to since the wreckage. Not from adrenaline this time. From something slower, older. 6 years of pretending finally catching up to her all at once. Her phone buzzed. A text from Priya. "Saw the news. You okay?" Dana looked at it for a long time before answering. Getting there. It was, she realized, the most honest thing she'd said to anyone in years. She set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and for the first time in 6 years, fell asleep without bracing for the sound of a ceiling coming down. 3 days later, Dana stood in a small conference room at the base outside town, in a staff sergeant's dress uniform for the first time in 6 years. It fit differently than she remembered. Heavier in some places, across the shoulders. Lighter in others, somewhere behind the ribs, like a weight had shifted without her noticing. Captain Alvarez sat across from her, a thick folder between them. "Your discharge paperwork had an administrative error," he said. "One that's been corrected. Officially, you were never separated for cause. Your unit lost a combat controller in an accident during a joint training exercise 8 years ago. Command needed a version of events that closed the file quietly. Yours was the name attached to convenience, not fault." Dana's jaw tightened. "I've spent 6 years thinking I got that man killed." "You didn't. The after-action report says otherwise. It says you tried to override a flight plan you knew was unsafe, and you were overruled by someone with more rank and less field experience. You've been carrying someone else's mistakes since the day you left." It took her a long moment to say anything. "That's not something you fix with a folder," she said finally. "No," Alvarez agreed, "but it's a start." He slid a second document across the table. "There's also this, a formal offer, if you want it. Combat medicine instructor, special tactics training pipeline. Full reinstatement of rank, Full benefits. Command specifically asked for you by name once this file crossed the right desk. Dana looked at the paper for a long time without touching it. Take your time, Alvarez said, standing. You've earned that much at least. Alone in the conference room afterward, Dana read the after-action report in full for the first time. The version that had been sealed for 8 years. The version nobody had thought she deserved to see. Danny Ruiz's name appeared 11 times in it. Her own name appeared 18. Every mention of hers noted, in the flat clinical language of military documentation, that she had objected to the flight plan verbally, twice before the accident occurred, and had been overruled both times by an officer who was later quietly transferred rather than disciplined. She read it twice more before she could set it down. 6 years of grief built on a story that wasn't even true, and no one had ever thought to correct her. Reyes was waiting in the hallway when she stepped out, arms still in its cast, a grin on his face that made him look 10 years younger than the man who'd been screaming her call sign in the wreckage 3 nights earlier. They're offering you a spot, he said. I heard through people who hear things. I know. You going to take it? Dana looked down the hallway, toward an exit sign glowing red at the end of it. An old habit she doubted would ever fully leave her, and found she didn't mind it the way she used to. I spent 6 years hiding in hospitals from what I used to be, she said. I think it's time I stopped. Reyes reached out with his good hand and gripped her wrist, the same way he had in the wreckage, except this time there was nothing to save him from. For what it's worth, he said, the Air Force didn't lose a good nurse when you signed that paper. The world just got its combat controller back. I might still keep the scrubs, Dana said. Just in case. Wouldn't expect anything less. She signed the reinstatement papers the following week, in the same building where she'd once received a uniform for the first time at 22, nervous and certain in equal measure. This time there was no nervousness left in her, only a kind of settled clarity, the sense of a circle closing rather than a new one beginning. Command offered a small reinstatement ceremony. She declined it. She asked instead for 5 minutes alone with a photo of Danny Ruiz that still hung in the squadron's hallway of honor, and stood in front of it long enough that the young airman assigned to escort her eventually stepped outside and left her to it. I know now, she told the photo quietly, the words feeling strange and necessary at the same time. I know it wasn't me. I wish I'd known it sooner. I wish you'd gotten to see me figure that out. Nobody answered her, of course. But something in her chest, tight for 6 years, finally loosened, just slightly, just enough to breathe through. Marcus Doyle sent her a letter 2 weeks later. No headset, no clipboard. Just a handwritten page that took him 3 tries to get right, judging by the crossed-out lines beneath it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said thank you, and that he understood now what he hadn't understood before. That competence rarely looks like the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it looks like the quiet woman nobody thought to trust, standing exactly where she needed to be, long before anyone else knew there was a reason to. Ellery's case went to a federal grand jury the following month. The stadium's parent company settled with the victims' families before it ever reached trial, and Section 214 was rebuilt from the ground up under a new inspection standard, named, unofficially, after the night it failed. Doyle himself was not fired. Corporate, eager to distance itself from Ellery's fraud, instead promoted him to oversee safety compliance for the entire regional stadium network. A decision he later admitted to Dana felt less like a reward and more like a sentence to prove, for the rest of his career, that he'd actually learned something from that night. The stadium held a small ceremony before the season's next home game, a plaque mounted quietly near the repaired section. No press invited this time. Priya stood beside Dana at the unveiling, arms crossed, eyes wet. They wanted you to speak, Priya said. I told them you'd say no. You told them right. Figured, doesn't mean I didn't want to hear it. Dana looked at the plaque, 57 names etched beneath a single line. To those who were there before help arrived. She didn't need her own name on it. She'd never wanted it there in the first place. Jake found her after the ceremony, out of his EMT uniform for once, looking younger and more unsure without it. I put in for special operations medic training, he said. Figured if I was going to keep doing this job, I wanted to actually know what I was doing, not just get lucky following someone who did. You weren't lucky, Dana said. You were teachable. That's rarer than people think. Dana kept Doyle's letter. She didn't need it to know the truth about herself anymore. But it was nice, for once, to hear someone else say it out loud, unprompted, without her having to prove a single thing first. 6 weeks later, she stood at the front of a training exercise on the far side of the base, watching 12 young combat controllers work through a mass casualty drill in the desert heat, fake blood and smoke grenades standing in for a war none of them had seen yet. One of them froze at the sight of a training dummy, hands shaking too hard to open his kit, exactly the way a man twice his age had frozen in a stadium tunnel not long ago. Dana walked over and knelt beside him, the way she wished someone had knelt beside her, once, a long time ago, before 6 quiet years and 1 loud night had brought her back to herself. "Breathe," she said. "In for 4, out for 4. Then show me what you know." He did, and slowly, his hands stopped shaking. "Better," Dana said, standing, brushing dessert dust from her knees. "Now do it again, and this time remember that the shaking doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means you care about getting it right. Use it. Don't fight it." The young airman nodded, steadier now, and moved to the next simulated casualty without hesitation. Watching from the edge of the training field, Dana thought about Section 214, about Danny Ruiz, about 6 years spent believing the wrong story about herself, and about how close she'd come to spending the rest of her life hiding in a role that never quite fit, simply because it felt safer than the truth. It hadn't been safer. It had only been quieter. 2 weeks into her instructor posting, Captain Alvarez found her again, this time in a different uniform, the OSI insignia replaced by something with no insignia at all, just a plain gray suit and a government sedan idling outside the training facility. "I'm not here about Ellery," he said, before she could ask. "This one's not my case anymore. It's above my clearance now, actually." "Then why are you here?" "Because they asked me to make the introduction. There's a joint task force forming, State Department and Air Force Special Tactics both, working extraction protocols in regions where civilian aid workers have started disappearing. They need someone who understands both combat medicine and how to move unnoticed through a crowd of people who aren't looking for a soldier. Someone who's done both, recently, publicly, and can still be trusted to disappear again when it matters." Dana looked at him for a long moment. "You're offering me exactly the kind of quiet nobody's supposed to know about." "I'm offering you the version of quiet you actually choose this time," Alvarez said. "Not the kind someone hands you because it's convenient." She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about the 12 young controllers she was training, about the way Jake had looked signing up for a harder path than the one he already had, about Doyle's letter still folded in her desk drawer, about a stadium plaque with 57 names on it and none of them hers. She said yes on the 4th day, on the condition that she'd keep her instructor post between deployments, unwilling to give up the version of this work that let her kneel beside a scared young airman and tell him his shaking hands didn't make him unready. Command agreed. Some quiet, it turned out, was worth keeping even after the rest of it came out into the light. The night before she left for her first briefing on the new assignment, Dana called her sister for the first time in months and actually answered honestly when asked how she was doing. "I'm good," she said, and meant it, maybe for the first time since Danny Ruiz's funeral. "Better than good, actually. I finally stopped hiding from the parts of myself that were never the problem in the first place." Her sister was quiet for a moment. "Does that mean you're going to tell me what you actually did for 6 years before Riverside?" Dana smiled, alone in her apartment, packing a bag she hadn't packed in 6 years, but somehow still knew exactly how to fill. "Someday. Not tonight. Tonight I've got an early flight." "Stay safe, Dana." "I always do," she said, and for the first time in a long while, she believed it. Respect isn't handed to you on a badge, and it isn't taken away by one either. It's earned in the moments nobody's watching, when the only thing left to prove something is what you choose to do about it. Dana understood that now better than she ever had, standing in the desert heat with dust on her boots and nothing left to hide. The end. Thank you for listening to this episode of Secrets of Silent Badges. If Dana's story moved you tonight, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're listening from, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. We'll see you in the next story.